Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Back to School Support and Resources for Inspire Science K-8. My name is Sarah Shuja, and I'm a marketing manager at McGraw Hill based in Dubai. I see a lot of people have joined in from different parts of the world. We have Lebanon, Kuwait, Iraq. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Before we go any further, I'm just going to pause and check if the audio connection is all right. So on your screens on the right side, you'll see a hand icon. It should be just below your name. Please click on the hand icon if you can hear me. So if you just click on the hand icon, excellent. Okay, I see a lot of hands going up, so we're clear on the sound. I'll give you a brief overview of the session today. This is an implementation training session for Inspire Science. So if you teach grades K to 8 and are using Inspire Science in the upcoming academic year, this session is for you. You will learn about teaching strategies to redesign your classroom. And we are delighted to have Jason Marshall join us today. Thank you for joining us, Jason.
Happy to be here.
Great. We have got moderators for you for the session today. So that's me, my colleague Afsana, and Nasir. We will be here to help you out with the chat function. So if you want to chat with us, you can put in there. We'll be replying back to you, or the Q&A. You can pop in your question and we'll be able to reply back to you. So we're here to help you out with your queries. A bit of background about Jason. Some of you might be familiar with him from our earlier session. I think back in April, Jason is a senior consultant at McGraw Hill. He's been a district manager and vice president at Urban Education. He has also got middle high school and is very well versed with internet technology industry. Jason has conducted numerous successful PD sessions, workshops, presentations, both in United States and abroad. So we're really happy and thankful to have Jason here join us. I'm just going to pass over to my colleague Afsana, who is going to go over the housekeeping slides, and then we'll pass over to Jason to begin the presentation then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarish. Just to check, can you hear me? My audio is working? Perfect. As Sarish just mentioned, we will just go over a few things that you guys should probably be aware of during the webinar, and then we'll begin. So just in terms of your audio connection, I think that most of you can hear with your hands raised. However, if you do experience any connectivity issues, you can also disconnect your audio and call in using your phone, which usually improves the network signal as well. Just to bear in mind, any platforms you may be using in the home, like YouTube, Netflix, that could be anybody in your home, that could impact the network as well. However, if you do miss anything during the call, we are recording the session, so we will be circulating that recording afterwards. Just other things, so you will be receiving an email after the webinar, probably within a week, which will give you the recording of the session along with the option to download a certificate of participation. So that could take up to a week to come in your inboxes, and of course there will be a Q&A at the end as well. And finally, so we unfortunately can't put your mics on during the session just because of the way it's been set up. However, we do have a chat box and a Q&A box on the right-hand side, which you can use to ask any questions, share any comments, just generally any technical issues you may have. You can drop me a message in the chat box as well. And we also have a feedback function just above the chat, which is a little microphone icon. Sometimes our speakers do tend to use that as well, and that's where you can find the quick responses on that. And that's all from me, so I'll pass over to you, Jason.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share my screens here. Got a couple of screens I'm going to share with you. I should see a PowerPoint now, and share one more application here. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Thank you all for joining this session. My name is Jason Marshall, and my goal today is to walk you through Inspire Science K-8, the program components, and the digital experience. The goal is to get you more comfortable with how the program is designed from a lesson level, what ancillary resources support the program, and then what the online experience looks like. from both a teacher standpoint and a student standpoint. So before we leave here today, I'm going to go in as a teacher. My name is Jason Marshall, and I'm going to show you how to navigate this side as a teacher. I'm also going to navigate as a student. So you can see what it looks like on the student side. Here's my student. His name is Jim. And over the next hour, I'm going to send Jim some assignments. Jim will take those assignments and then send them back to me as a teacher. And we can see how it works on both ways, going from the teacher assigning to the students taking an assignment and then seeing those scores on the teacher side. But before I start, I'd like to get a feel for your understanding of Inspire Science and just your feelings on a few things. So I'm going to have you open your chat window, and I want you to answer a few questions for me. Okay? I've got one question for you right now, and that is, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself about teaching students remotely? Now, my guess is you started in maybe March, possibly April. What advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time and do it all over again? Sure, so many lessons were learned along the way. Go ahead and use your chat window to share your thoughts. I'll give you a moment to do that. Nothing quite yet, at least I'm not seeing anything. Any advice you'd give yourself? Patience? Any tools that you use that have been helpful for you? Anything at all that you'd like to share with the group? Classroom management. Great thought. How do you manage your classroom in a remote environment? It's a little bit different, isn't it? Anything else? Anything else that you'd like to share? Prepare well. Very good. Like that. Try to prepare more resources for them to really, in case you, very good. Having a variety of resources. Make it interesting. Great suggestions. All right. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. I've got one more question, and then we're going to get going. This will give me an understanding. Activities. Thank you, Angie. Great suggestion. Having a bunch of activities for them. My next question is this. How would you rate your understanding of Inspire Science from 1 to 10? 1 being you're brand new to the program. 10, you're an old pro. You know it really, really well. How would you gauge your understanding of Inspire Science? I've got a 1 there, a beginner. 1, 2, you're a beginner. 10, you're an expert. I've got a 7, an 8, a 1. Let's see what else do we have here. 3, I've got a beginner. Okay, very good. This helps me get an idea of where to begin with this training. Thank you for sharing that information for you. So we'll start as though you have very little understanding of Inspire Science, and we'll build you up from there. Should you need a deeper dive, our wonderful panelists and hosts can schedule one, and I'd be happy to do a deeper dive for those of you that are a little bit farther along. So let's go ahead and begin. Inspire Science is a K-8 program, and it is comprised of 4 units per grade level. So what you're looking at now is grade kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. There are 4 units per student per grade level, and these are write-in student editions. So students are writing in their data. Their labs are in here. They're asked questions in here, and feel free to write in them because we replace them every year as long as you have Inspire Science in your classroom. So 4 units per grade level K-5. That is also the same 6 through 8. So whether you're a kindergarten teacher, a 3rd grade teacher, an 8th grade teacher, your students will have 4 units per student per grade level, and they're writing in them each and every year. Now there are 4 corresponding teachers editions. So for each one of these units, there's a corresponding teacher's edition that accompanies it for you, the teacher. So our program Inspire Science is organized into 4 units per student per year. Each one of those units is broken down into 1 or 2 modules. So here we see 4 units for grade 4. And in each one of these, there might be 1, there might be 2 modules, okay? And each one of these modules is broken down into lessons. So units broken down into modules, broken down into lessons. If you want to think of the modules as chapters, feel free to do that. We call them modules in Inspire Science, but chapters will do as well, okay? So units, modules, and lessons. But we also know that students are accessing content in very different ways than they ever have before. They're used to being connected. They're used to turning things on. So it's important for students to have access in different ways. So Inspire Science allows students to have digital access, and we're going to share that digital experience today. On what devices is that digital access available? On a PC, laptop, Chromebook, tablet, and even a smartphone. So as a teacher, you can send a test to students on your device of your choosing, and they can take it on the device of their choosing, even a smartphone, and send that test back to you for scoring. So how is the program organized at the module level? So what we're looking right now is a module schematic. And so this gives you an idea of how a module is organized. And by the way you see it organized on this page and that I'm about to go through is the same way it's organized online. So if you know how it's organized in print in the student edition, you'll be very familiar with how the online experience is organized. Just keep that in the back of your mind, and that'll make more sense as I go along the way. So every module begins with a module opener, okay? It goes into a STEM module project launch. This is an introduction into the STEM module project that awaits at the end. So at the end of all lessons, there's a STEM project awaiting for students. But we introduce it at the beginning of the module, just so it gives context to everything that follows. We don't want it to be looming at the end without students thinking about it. We want them to be thinking about the STEM project all along the way. Hey, I'm going to be responsible for designing a better boat or a communication device. I need to be thinking about that in each and every lesson. We don't want to ambush them with that project at the end. So we have this module opener that introduces. We have a STEM module project launch, letting them know what they're responsible for at the end. And then we go into a lesson. And every lesson utilizes the 5E lesson model, except we have one additional step, Paige Keeley and her formative assessment probes, this circle that you see here in purple. After a lesson, they're going to do some contributing to their planner or to their STEM project. So they're being asked to make a contribution to that STEM project at the end. So after each and every lesson, they're making a little contribution to the STEM project. So by the time lesson 2 or lesson 3 or lesson 4 is done, that STEM project is halfway done because they've been participating and contributing to it at the end of each and every lesson. So this is a schematic. It's found in the program, and I'll show you where this is found. But this gives you a big picture view of how a module is organized in the student edition. So what does this look like? This is a conceptual view. What does it look like really in the student book? Well, let's take a look. So here's that STEM module project, or here's that module opener, this location right here, that module opener. And here it's introducing a phenomena. How does a lighthouse transmit a message across the distance? So this whole module is on information processing and transfer. And it's going to talk about how animals communicate and how humans communicate. And is there possibly similarities to how animals and humans communicate? So to introduce this phenomena, we have a module phenomena opener. So the online experience, and here I am in an online presentation, mirrors the book. So if you want to walk students through the book when they get in class, actually, and everybody's in school, you can do that in sort of a PowerPoint-like experience. But you can also assign this presentation to your students. And so they can walk through the book in a very interactive format. So here I have that same page from the student book, but embedded in this presentation is a video. So it's referenced in the student book, but it's certainly not, it's something a book can play. A book can't play a video, but you can go online and have that played for students. Here we have one on dolphins. Now you can't hear this, but what you hear is dolphin sounds, clicks and squeals. And I can manipulate this with my cursor. And I can look around and imagine what students are thinking when they hear those clicks and squeals. I wonder what those dolphins are saying to each other. Do they have a language? If they have a language, do they have an alphabet? How far distance can their language travel? Do they have ears to hear their alphabet? I don't see any ears on a dolphin. How are they interpreting this sound? And do all dolphins have the same language? If I'm in one ocean, does a dolphin speak the same language as a dolphin in another ocean? These are all questions students will have. And that's what this module opener phenomena is designed to do. It's designed to spark curiosity and get students thinking about the phenomena, okay? So every module will begin with a phenomena opener video. And it's making a connection between how dolphins communicate and how lighthouses communicate. And could there possibly be similarities? From there, we go into that STEM module project introduction. And so here's that introduction into the STEM project. And this one happens to be an engineering challenge. They come in two types, science challenges and engineering challenges. Engineering challenges, students are actually going to create a solution to a real world problem. In this example, they're being asked they're going to be told that, hey, at the end of all lessons, when the module is over, we're going to ask you to be a telecommunications engineer. And you're going to build a device that can communicate a message using either light or sound that a student can understand across the classroom. That's going to be their task at the end. They get introduced to it at the beginning, and it gives context to everything that follows, okay? So we've seen the module opener, we've seen the STEM module project launch, which is the page we're seeing here. From there, we go into the 5E lesson model, the first lesson. So we use the 5E lesson model. Many of you are familiar with that. But remember, we have one additional step, Paige Keeley and her formative assessment probes. Now, Paige Keeley is a former president of NSTA. She's a wildly successful author. You may have seen some of her books, wonderful stuff. And she's known for uncovering misconceptions and presenting a scenario that students must consider. Now, if you were in my previous webinar, I think I may have shown this, but we'll do this again in case you were not. This is one of those cases we're going to ask you to use the chat window again. And here's the scenario I want you to consider. Sarah's science class is investigating heat energy. They wonder what would happen to the temperature reading on a thermometer if they put the thermometer inside of a mitten. Sarah's group obtained 2 thermometers and a mitten. They put one thermometer inside a mitten and the other thermometer on the table next to the mitten. An hour later, they compared the readings on the 2 thermometers. The temperature in the room remained the same throughout the experiment. What do you think Sarah's group will discover from their investigation? Circle the response that best matches your thinking. Now, this isn't the probe for this particular lesson, but it's what I like to do to introduce people to the probe concept. So you have 3 possible answer choices for this scenario. Do you think the thermometer inside the mitten after an hour will have a lower temperature reading than the thermometer on the table? Do you think the thermometer inside the mitten after an hour will have a higher temperature reading than the thermometer on the table? Or do you think that C, both thermometers will have the same temperature reading? So in the chat window, I'd like for you to put A, B, or C. What do you think students will discover? Will that the thermometer inside the mitten have a lower temperature reading? If you do, choose A. If you think it's a higher temperature reading, choose B. And I see some Bs going already. Very good. Thank you for sharing with that. All right, Ahmed. I see a B there. And if you think both thermometers have the same temperature reading, choose C. So what do you think students will discover in this particular probe? Anybody else? I have 3 possible suggestions here. Anybody else want to take a stab at this? Well, I'll continue here. Now, the answers are going to be all over the place in the middle school and elementary school classroom. The answer isn't the most important part of the probe. It's always this last part. Describe your thinking. It's in the student's description is where you're going to uncover misconceptions. If we were here today, I might use the fingers underneath the chin strategy, where I'd say, hey, if you think the best answer is A, I want you to put 1 finger underneath your chin and look at me. If you think the best answer is B, I want you to put 2 fingers underneath your chin and look at me. And if you think the best answer is C, put 3 fingers underneath your chin. Look at me the entire time. It's just sort of an anonymous response technique. And then I'd have you grouped in tables of 2 or 3, and then I'd have you share your thinking, what you think the best answer is, and why you think it is the best answer. Remember, this explanation is the most important part. So students are communicating, they're engaging in scientific discourse. You're uncovering misconceptions along the way, and it really turbocharges this lesson. Every single lesson begins in this way. And there are strategies for each and every probe. So you don't have to think of a strategy that is associated with a probe. They're really cool strategies. Some involve throwing paper, students sharing their idea, putting it on a piece of paper and sharing it around the class. Some involve an expert group in the center. It's called the fishbowl. And then around it are listeners. And that listener can become part of the expert group in the middle. And so there's all sorts of really cool strategies to go with this probe. And every probe every lesson begins with a probe. And if you look The probe is encircled in purple. So if you're flipping through the pages in a student book and you see purple, that marks the beginning of a lesson, and that marks the probe. So there's some color coding in Inspire Science that's important to get used to, and it'll let you know for navigational purposes where stuff is. So every lesson begins with the probe. When you see this purple edge page, that marks the beginning of a new lesson. And here's the one for this particular lesson that we're walking through, and I'll go through this very fast. Two friends were talking about animal eyes. They noticed that animals that are active at night have very large eyes, and this is what they said. Animals like owls have large eyes so they can see in the dark. They do not need light to see, is what Laura said. But Jaden said animals like owls have large eyes to help them see in the dark, but they still need some light to see. So who would you agree with on most? You don't have to put this in the chat window, but that's what we're asking students. And remember, it's that explanation is where you're going to uncover their misconceptions. Another way to monitor their thinking over time is the sticky note strategy, where you actually post the probe. And you may not be able to see this, but this blue sticky note in the upper right-hand corner, it says April 15th. That marks the beginning of the lesson. And it looks like a lot of students thought A was the best answer. And by the way, with this probe, looks like there's answer choices A through G. So we got a lot of A choices, certainly not everyone in the classroom at the beginning of the lesson. But a week later in purple, boy, has their thinking changed. They've come off of A quite a bit, and they're not quite sure. Their thinking has changed. And then 2 weeks into the lesson in yellow, now they're starting to think that D might be the best answer. Certainly not all of them. We have some B and some Gs, but a lot of them are thinking D is the best possible best answer. Now, this process mirrors the way scientists think about information. Even scientists change their thinking as they get additional information. So this is how we want students to think. We want them to revisit their thinking over time. And there'll be a point in this lesson where we ask students to do that. So now we're in engage. We're in the first E of the lesson cycle. And here we have a phenomena video here as well. We call this the investigative phenomena. Most every lesson will begin with one. So we're talking about animal eyes. How do eyes help animals see? Well, let's take a look at this video. It's called The Eyes. I wonder what that cat is looking at. Why are his eyes changing shape? Is there more light in the room or less light in the room? Is something getting closer to him or farther away? Is it possible that he's communicating with his eyes? Why are his eyes changing in that way? So this will spark curiosity, get students to generate some questions and discussion topics, and this will launch the lesson. And so as a teacher, so you don't have to think about what questions and how to proceed with this, the Teacher's Edition will always share with you how to get this lesson started and how to use this video or anything in Inspire Science. We're in the second E now, Explore, and that will always be a lab of some kind or hands-on investigation or some sort of investigation. And notice that the investigations are yellow. So labs and investigations are yellow. And it could be a hands-on lab. Those are hard to do remotely, aren't they? But you could do a simulation. That's something you could do remotely. Or a data analysis experience, or perhaps a research project. These are some of the things that you could choose to do remotely, since hands-on investigations are often challenging to impossible now that we're doing remote learning. So yellow for labs and investigations, and as we saw earlier, the probes are purple. This is just a color coding technique that we use just to make it easier for teachers and students to navigate a lesson. Wherever you see yellow, we know it's a lab or an investigation. There are at least 2, as many as 5 labs and investigations in each and every lesson. Now we're in the third E, Explain. And students are going to get some content here. Vocabulary, listed in blue, highlighted in yellow. And there are also references to videos and simulations. So here it says I have a video and a simulation that I can watch. So as students, I can go and access that simulation. As a teacher, I could assign this simulation to my students, and I'll show you how to assign this stuff. All of these digital resources that we have on Inspire Science can be assignable to students, and they can complete these online. Even chunks of information. So even this page or this section, that can be assigned to students as well. We'll see how all that works online when we go to the online experience. embedded as well. Now I'm going to fast forward this one. This one talks about animal eyes and how do dogs see the world versus a cat and a snake. So all these interactive pieces are embedded in the science narrative and are accessible to teachers and students anywhere, anytime, on any device. We're in the second to last E, and that will always mean an extension of some kind. So can we apply this to the real world? Can we have applied what we've learned to a career? And so Elaborate will always be an extension outside of the classroom. In K through 5, we have these STEM career kids. They're a design feature that gets students talking. STEM career kids are in videos, they're in print, and they'll facilitate discussions. They'll get students thinking about STEM careers at a much earlier age, and that's why we put them in there. In Elaborate, you're typically going to see another lab or an investigation, so look for those. Remember, there's at least 2, as many as 5 in each and every lesson, but you're also going to see connections to math, engineering, reading, and other disciplines outside of the science classroom. 6 through 8 teachers, your Elaborate looks a little bit different, but the idea is the same. We're making connections to society here, connections to careers. In 6 through 8 Inspire Science, these are high interest, magazine-style articles connecting the science that you're teaching to the outside world. So K through 8 is very much aligned, but just with some subtle differences. The look in Elaborate just looks a little bit different in grades 6 through 8. When we get to evaluate, we're going to summarize what we've learned as a student. There's a 3-dimensional thinking prompt. And then there's an opportunity to revisit that probe. Let's go back and see if our thinking has changed over time. So this is a prompt to do that. Notice it has an arrow, purple arrow moving back. Remember, purple is associated with the probes. From here, we have an extended opportunity. This is an opportunity for those students that are gifted and talented, finish early, need a challenge. Hey, give them a project that they can go on online. It's just something that is that takes the concept a little bit further. And notice that there's a little arrow here. And I don't have it popping up, but this little arrow here is pointing forward, this orange arrow. And basically what this is saying to students, it's time to make a contribution to the STEM module project. Remember, after the end of each and every lesson, students are making a little bit of a contribution based on what they've learned so far to that STEM module project. So it's saying, hey, go to that STEM module project. So we're going to flip past lesson 2, lesson 3, and we're going to make a contribution. And there's a space for me to do that right here in lesson 1. It says planning after lesson 1. The same is true after lesson 2. After I finish lesson 2, there's a planning piece here. And here's a place for me to make a contribution after lesson 3. And then after all the lessons, we're just going to finish it up. We're going to finish this project. If it's an engineering challenge, we're going to use the engineering design process, or engineering design loop is what it's called, to come up with a creative solution to this real world problem. In this case, it's designing a device that uses either light or sound to communicate a message across the class. We're going to build that model, we're going to refine it, we're going to test it, make it better, and then we're going to communicate our results and that device to the class. And so that is how a lesson flows K through 8. Now there are some subtle differences grades 6 through 8. So the lesson that we just went through was a 4th grade lesson. So how is 6th, 7th, 8th grade a little bit different? It's 99% the same, but there are some subtle differences. And one is that every lesson, at the beginning of every lesson, you're going to see a 2-page claim, evidence, and reasoning spread. Claim, evidence, and reasoning is a feature found K through 8, but it's a little bit more prominent 6 through 8. So in K through 5, you'll see a little feature in each and every module. In 6 through 8, you'll see this feature being a 2-page spread in each and every lesson. Okay? And students can go back and collect their evidence. So wherever they see this blue box, whether they're 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade, they know that that's their, or 8th grade, that's their clue to go back to that claim, evidence, and reasoning spread and collect their evidence. And it will tell them exactly where to do that. That little blue box will say, hey, go back to box B or box A and collect your evidence, and students know exactly where to do that. Now, claim, evidence, and reasoning is a framework that some teachers use and some teachers do not use. So keep in mind, if you're not a claim, evidence, and reasoning user, don't think that you have to integrate this in your classroom. You can skip right over it if you'd like, but know that it's there in case you do it. It's something that's really valuable in the process of students figuring out how phenomena works over time. I encourage you to use it, but do so when you're comfortable doing it and skip over it until then, okay? So claim, evidence, and reasoning. Let's continue. What percentage of us are students are visual learners? About 65% of us. So we got to have some visual resources, and we do. So let's talk about some of the visual resources, both print and digital, you'll find in Inspire Science. Foldables is one of them. These are three-dimensional graphic organizers. We've been partners with Foldables for about 20 years now, and in that time, Foldables have become the most successful graphic organizer system in the world. We're only found in McGraw Hill Resources. I bet you many of you are using Foldables right now. Foldables are a part of Inspire Science. We've seen those phenomena videos. Remember, most every module will begin with a phenomena anchoring video, or anchoring phenomena video, and most every lesson will begin with an investigative phenomena video. What's the idea of phenomena again? It's just designed to get students talking, thinking, and spark the lesson, to get students invested in figuring out what's going on over time. For those labs that are too dangerous, too time-consuming, too expensive to do in class, students can do them virtually. So here we have a set of virtual experiences. K-8. On the bottom left, it's iodine here being heated up. And as the temperature increases, it looks like the volume in the confined space is increasing. And sure looks like the molecules are getting agitated. This is something you may not be able to do in a elementary school classroom. And you certainly can't do it remotely, but in a virtual situation you can. So you could assign any one of these virtual simulations to students to take a look at, to manipulate, to change the variables, and share their thinking with the class and with you over time. So these are experiences that work great in remote learning and are assignable by you, the teacher. If you're a kindergarten or first grade teacher, you have paired read alouds. These are a lot like the big books we used to see where students are gathered around and let's read together, except these are projectable and assignable. So you can project them if you have students in front of you when we get back on campus. And they're assignable to students remotely if you choose to do that. They come in two genres, both fiction and nonfiction. So there's a fiction side and a nonfiction side to all of these. In grades 2 through 5, there are investigator articles. These are high interest magazine-style articles that go over cutting-edge science. These are also assignable digitally and perfect for remote learning. Each one comes with a task at the end. And so you see cutting-edge technologies like eye technology. I remember seeing these in a lot of the Mission Impossible movies. Is it possible that we really have that eye technology? We are getting very close. You'll see articles like driverless cars. So these are meant to be very student-friendly, and remember, each and every one of these is completed, or at the end, you'll see a task. Sometimes it's write a paragraph. Sometimes it's, hey, go online and do some research on this. So they make really great assignments in a remote learning situation. And in K-5, we've got leveled readers. Here you see approaching level in orange, on level in blue, beyond level in green, and then purple is for English language learners. So the same headings, the same titles. Students don't know that they're getting a different reading level, but they are, and you can control that. They don't need to know what the colors represent. Only you know that and can give them the level reader that they need to be successful. These level readers are found K through 5. And then finally, assessment. What sort of assessment choices have we seen so far? Well, we've seen the Page-Keeley probe. That's a formative assessment opportunity. Formative assessment should be assessment for learning, not assessment of learning. So with that in mind, formative assessment should be at the beginning of the lesson. And that's exactly where our Page-Keeley probes are found. Every lesson begins, K through 8, begins with the Page-Keeley probe. And you know you're at the beginning of the lesson where you see these purple pages. So if you're flipping through the book, you see a purple page, that marks the beginning of a new lesson. So formative assessment with the Page-Keeley probes. We've seen performance assessment with that STEM project. Every module ends with a performance project. So formative assessment, beginning of every lesson. We've got performance assessment opportunities. And by the way, just like I've given permission to skip the claim evidence and reasoning at the lesson level, if you feel as though the STEM module project is not something you have time for or not something that aligns to your goals in the classroom, you don't have to do it. It is very integrated in the program. We highly suggest you do, but it's something you can't skip. It's not going to ruin your lesson, your module experience if you don't do it, but we suggest you do it. So performance assessment at the end of every module, and then summative assessment's not going away, is it? So we're going to want to have a test generator, and our Inspire Science program has one. Create a test in moments. You can edit that test, make any changes you want. You can print that test out if you'd like, and then make copies, let's say when we get back on campus. But now remotely, we probably want to send that test to our students digitally. You can do that with Inspire Science. They take that test, and notice it even has technology-enhanced questions, like you see on the screen, where students are manipulating things on the screen, and they're putting things in certain situations, maybe labeling the parts of a cell or matching a definition with a term. They are part of our test generator. And if students take that test, it gets scored for you automatically, and you can even generate reports to see how students are doing. Part of a data dashboard. So a lot of different resources, not just the student edition, but also online to support you in classroom instruction of Inspire Science, but also in the remote learning of Inspire Science. Now, there's one other tool that I want to go over quickly, and this is for our 6th through 8th grade classroom. So if you're a 6th grade teacher, 7th grade, 8th grade teacher, your students have access to something called LearnSmart. It's adaptive, personalized learning. So I always like to use the analogy of sites like Amazon or Netflix or any of these online platforms. The more you go to them, the more they're getting to know you a little bit better. And LearnSmart's doing the same thing. So how does it work? It starts with the Smart Book that comes pre-highlighted for your students. Yellow is essential content that students must understand from that page. It focuses their attention on the most important core concepts. Once students have mastered those core concepts, that Smart Book turns green. And by the way, I can assign this Smart Book to my students. And it's really, really good for a remote learning classroom. So how does the Smart Book know what students know and what they don't know? How does it know to turn green? Well, students are constantly being assessed. They're being asked questions continuously. They read a little bit, they're being assessed a little bit. They read a little bit more, they're being assessed a little bit more. Notice there are questions of different types. Check all that apply. Matching. All of these different, and sometimes students are going to have to generate an answer. And notice it's also gauging their confidence. So I can say, I know it, I think so, I'm unsure, and I have no idea. It's taking their confidence, how long it takes them to say how confident they are, taking all the data available to discover if students know this concept or not. And if students, let's say, type in a word and misspell it, LearnSmart will recognize that and say, okay, we know that you got that one right, but let's work on the spelling. It's prokaryotic, but it's spelled a slightly different way. All along the way, LearnSmart is collecting data for the student and the teacher about what students know and what they don't know. So you can access reports to see exactly what students' knowledge state is at any given time. Really valuable information to have for both the student and the teacher. So students can go into their most challenging objectives, get help where they feel weak, and teachers can go in and see how the class is performing at a big picture level. And LearnSmart's it's a very successful tool. We've had it at McGraw Hill for our AP and college classrooms for a long time. So there's a lot of data that supports its efficacy. So recently we brought it down into high school and even middle school. And it's shown to be just as successful at improving student performance at that level as well. So that's an overview of Inspire Science. Okay, we've taken a look at an overview of Inspire Science. Now let's go online and take a look at how the platform works together with the online experience. So remember, I have Jim here, or Jason here, that's me, And I also have Jim up and running. Okay? That's my student. And we're going to look at both sides. So we're going to start on the teacher side. So I'm going to start as a teacher here. And I'm going to go into, how about my 4th grade classroom? And I'll spend some time in 7th grade as well. Now, on the teacher side, the 4th grade experience and the middle school experience, let's say 7th grade, they look very similar. Let me show you what I mean by here. When I go into grade 4 for a teacher, I've got a navigational location over here on the left. All my places that I can go to on the teacher side are here on the left. Excuse me. I could close that if I wanted to by clicking on this icon in the upper left. Now, why would you want to? I think most teachers like to keep that open, so I'm going to click on that icon and there they are. I have a tool up here in the upper right-hand corner right next to my name. This is important. I click on it, this little icon. I have a help button here. If I click on help, this is information I want to make sure you're aware of. So I've got getting started as a teacher. If I click on getting started, right here in the middle, I've got a location called Inspire Science 2020. So if at any time you need support after this webinar on class management, on how to plan, how to work the online assessments, here you're going to find videos and printouts to do it. A lot of video tutorials found here, so don't forget that these are here. Now, where did I find these? I went to this little icon, I went to help, and then I chose teacher, but the students have this aside as well. Okay, so when they go online, they have help for student navigation as well. And notice I have Google Classroom resources here as well. So if you need videos on how to integrate this with Google Classroom, they're found right here as well. So important part right up here in the upper right-hand corner. Right here in the middle here, I have browse my course and search for resources. Now these two locations, these two tools are also found in my course view. So if I go to course here, I have this course search and browse for resources. So they'll basically take you to the same place. And let me just prove that fact. If I go back to my dashboard here, by the way, the dashboard, think of it as your home screen because it's the first screen that you're going to see once you enter the online platform. And it's shaded here so you know you're in the dashboard. And if I were to click on resources, where is it going to take me? It's going to take me right here to the course view. So it's basically two different places to go to the same location. Now, so I'll start here in the course view. And so this course location and this resources location are two different locations to find your resources. So if you're asking yourself, how do I find, you talked about level readers, you talked about investigator articles, you talked about all this stuff, where do I find it? You want to go to this course view. And these will let you find it two different ways. So I'm going to show you the resources search first and how you find resources that way. So I'm in grade 4 Inspire Science, and it says I have 1,456 resources. Boy, that's too many. I want to find something a little bit more specific. So I could think of resources as a filtering tool. So I can filter down into the module that I want to cover today. Let's say this module on energy transfer. Now I'm down to 207 resources. Maybe I want to filter down even more into sound and light, lesson 2. Now I'm down to 34 resources. So I can filter down to the resources that I'm looking for quickly and easily by choosing the module, and the lesson that I want to get into. And here are all my resources. Now, notice all these locations, all these resources here. These are, in some cases, some teacher resources. So this lesson at a glance happens to be kind of a lesson plan for you, letting you know how long a lesson should take, day 1, day 2. And this is just a suggestion. Some of these E's might take longer, some might take less time, but the lesson at a glance is a big picture view for you, the teacher, on how long this lesson should take. So some of these are teacher resources. Some of these resources are assignable locations within the student textbook. Let me show you what I mean. So remember, every lesson in the student book begins with you said probe, you are correct. So here we have a probe for this lesson, okay? It marks the beginning of the lesson. I can assign this probe if I wanted to by clicking on these dots, these stacked dots, and I could assign that probe. So if we were in class all together, maybe I assigned the probe in the print textbook. But if we're working digitally, I could assign this same probe remotely. So let's take a look at this probe. Let's just see if this is something that we want to use. So I could take a look at this. It says energy from light. Two friends were arguing about energy from the sun. They had different ideas about using the sun's energy. And this is their choices here and who they agree with most and why. So it looks just like the print textbook, except it's organized for an online experience. So maybe I want to send this to my students. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and send this probe. I want them to complete it online and send it back to me. So to do that, I'm going to click on this kebab menu. And as we go through this training, you'll recognize this kebab menu is a pretty powerful tool in this program. So whenever you're asking yourself, I know I should be able to assign that, or I know I should be able to edit that, or when you're thinking that you should be able to do something, but you don't see a button that says that you can do it, see if there's a kebab menu nearby. So I want to assign this probe. I'm going to click on the kebab menu. Basically, the kebab is just 3 stacked dots. So I'm going to click Assign. And so I'm going to have this due on Friday for my students. I'm going to give them some instructions. Complete this probe and return to me. Be sure to hit Submit. Okay? I'm going to make this worth 100 points, and I'm going to assign it. Now, if you have multiple classes that you want to assign that one assignment to, it will give you those choices over here. But I don't have any other classes in this grade, so it doesn't give me that option. But you could send it to all classes at once if you'd like. I'm going to click Assign. Now a little red bar will appear next to this assignment, letting me know when I assigned it and when it is due. Now, when I assign something, that automatically shows up in 3 locations for me as a teacher. It will show up in my calendar. Let's look at my calendar. And here's my assignment. Now, that doesn't look like a calendar. Let me look at the month view here. And if I scroll down, you can see that assignment that I made. It will show up in my assignment section. Let's click Assignments. And there's my probe. Nobody's turned it in yet. I have 14 people in my class, and 0 people have submitted this. It will also show up in my dashboard, that home screen. Remember, the dashboard is the home screen. So whenever you assign something, it shows up in your dashboard, it shows up in your assignments, and it shows up in your calendar. Okay? Now, what does it look like on the student side? I just assigned that to my student. Let's see what my students see. So if I go into gyms, I'm in gym side, my student, and I go to grade 4, let's take a look at what it looks like. And this online experience has recently been revamped. If you used this program last year, this may, in grades K through 5, this may look a little bit new to you. We wanted to make it a little bit more student-friendly. And so here's my probe waiting for me. It's right here waiting for me. We're not going to do it just yet, but here's that probe I just assigned to my students showing up in my home screen for gym. When I complete it, it will show up in my past work section. But we're not ready to take it just yet. I want to send Jim a few more assignments before we do that. Okay? So we've sent to Jim 1 assignment. And how did we send Jim that assignment? We went to Resources, and we filtered down to the resource that we're looking for. So what we did is we went into a module, we went into a lesson, and then we scrolled down and found the resource that we're looking for. Every one of these locations is a location in the book that is assignable. Here's the inquiry activity from the book. Some of these are videos that support the location. So not only are these locations from the book, some of these will have additional resources. And I'll share what those are as well, like this inquiry rewind video. So all of these locations are assignable by me, the teacher. There are some leveled readers. Maybe I want to assign them a leveled reader. STEM career connection. And I can go to page 2 and take a look at additional resources on page 2. Investigator articles. Let's send them an investigator article. Okay? I'm going to assign this to Jim, my student. I'm going to have this due on Monday. I'm going to say read and be ready to share your thoughts. Do I want all of my students to get it? Or do I want some of my students to get it? So I could choose specific students if I wanted to. But I'm going to keep it as all my students. I'm going to make this worth 100 points. And I'm going to click assign. Now, a red bar will appear right here, letting me know that I assigned it when it's due. What else do I know will take place here? I know that since I assigned it, it will show up in 3 locations. Now, what 3 locations will it show up in as a teacher? If you said assignments, you are correct. There's my investigator article. Nobody's turned it in yet. If you said my calendar, you are correct. There it is. That's the day view. Let's take a look at the month view. And there's my investigator article. And when it's due, it'll show up in the due part. And it will also show up in my dashboard, which is my home screen. So every time, and here it is, every time I assign something, it shows up in the assignments, calendar, and my dashboard. Okay? Now, so far, we've sent 2 resources from the resources search. One other way you can filter in the resources search is by keyword. So maybe I want to do a keyword search right here, inquiry. And I've got 204 results. Maybe I want to do an inquiry experience on energy. I have 41 results. So I can continue to filter down to what I'm looking for by either keyword search or unit module and lesson. I could even choose by resource type. So if I want to go specifically to a PDF, I know it's a PDF, let me just filter it to the PDFs, I could do that. If I want to go just to assessments, I could do that. So I've got filtering tools and resources. A lot of our teachers use the resources section to find what they're looking for. It's one way that we have to find your resources in Inspire Science. The second way to find your resources is the course view. Okay? It is the second way to find resources. So you got the resources view, and you have the course view to find your resources. The course view just organizes your resources a little bit differently. Here it organizes them into digital file folders. So if I click on this little icon here, I'm going to see essentially a digital table of contents of my book, right? Here are all the modules in my, my program for my grade level, and in each module I've got lessons. If I go to a specific lesson, let's say energy transfer and collisions, lesson 3, I have file folders that will contain all of my resources. So in the resources search, I had a list. In the course view, I have all of them organized into handy little file folders. And some people prefer finding their resources this way. So my Science Pro, it's here just like it was in the resources search. It's just in my file folder here. And here I can assign it by clicking an Assign button. And so that's one big difference between the resources search and the course view is when you're in the course view, you actually have an Assign button that's clearly visible, and you can assign using that. When I go into Engage, I've got my resources here. Explore and Explain, the same. These are all resources that I can assign. So they would have shown up in my resources filtering tool, or I could pull them up this way. So let's say I want to send this to my student, this read about activity. Let me take a look at it first to make sure this is something I want to assign to my students. I open it up. It's 2 pages long. I've got a little reading assignment here. And I've got a little question it's asking me at the end. Okay, yeah, I think this is good. Maybe I want to assign this to my students. I click the Assign button, and just like before, we have the same template. I choose the due date. I say Complete and Return. I want all of my students to get this. And let's say I want it to be worth 100 points just for completing this. And I click Assign. Red bar appears letting me know I assigned it. It shows up in my assignment section. Now I have 3 assignments for Jim. It shows up in my calendar, and it shows up in my dashboard. Okay? So I've sent 3 things to my student Jim. Now when I go to Jim's side, and let's refresh the screen. Now Jim has those 3 assignments waiting for him. Now, one thing that we haven't sent to Jim yet is actually a test or a quiz. So let's send Jim one more thing before we start taking these assignments on Jim's side. If I go to Jim's side, the teacher's side, back into Jason Marshall, teachers, you have an assessment section here. Okay, so if you're looking just for a quiz or an assessment, which I think are going to be tools that you use remotely, you want to go to Assessments. Let me click on Assessments here. When I click on Assessments, you have test banks organized by your modules. So maybe I want to go into the module on information processing and transfer. When I do that, I've got a lesson check that's pre-made for each and every lesson. I have a module pre-test and a module post-test. Okay? I could take a look at this lesson check just by clicking on it and viewing the questions. Okay, so I could take a look at the questions now. I could put my cursor on here to view the questions, and the entire question will expand. I could go to student preview and preview it this way, and preview it the way a student might take a look at it. So student preview will allow me to see it the way a student sees it. I could go decide, yeah, I think this is a good quiz for my students. This is one of those closed questions. All right. And once I decide if this is something that I want to send to my students, I can send that to my students. So let me go back at here, and this is something that I definitely want to send to my students. So let me click back here, and I'm going to send this lesson check, or assign this lesson check. Remember I said if there's sometime you want to assign something and you don't see an assign button, see if there's a kebab menu nearby. So this lesson check, I'm going to find this kebab menu. I'm going to click on it. I could print this lesson check out, or I could edit it, or I could assign it. Let me go ahead and click on Assign, and we'll see in a template very similar to what we saw before. We'll choose a due date. I'll choose Monday for this one. I'll choose, oh, I know why. Give me one moment here. I've got to switch something up really fast in my roster settings. And, oh, I see, 29, gotcha. 29, let me go ahead and save that. And let's go back to that assessment here. So I'm going to go to Energy Transfer. I'll just choose this one here. I'll click Assign, and I'll make this due on the 27th. I could choose to share it with Google Classroom if I wanted to. But if I scroll down here, here are some additional settings that I think are important. What do you want students to see when they complete this? Do you want them to see their completed assignment? Do you want them to see the scores but not the answers? I can choose what students see after they take this test. I could see, I choose whether they get explanations or not. Okay. I also have these additional student settings. And here it will give you students access to, let's say, text-to-speech. So maybe you want students to be able to have the question read to them. I have a text-to-speech feature here. I have a line reader here. Maybe you want them to have a line reader. So these are additional tools that are available to students. Maybe a calculator. Okay? simple or even scientific. Now, elementary, you're probably not going to need a scientific calculator, but you have these tools available to students. So I'm going to click on those three just for the purposes of showing you what those look like. And I'm going to click Assign. Okay. So now in assignments, I have a lesson check as well. So we've sent 4 things to our students. 3 assignments from the book and a test, which was that lesson check. Let's go over to Jim's side and let's start taking some of these assignments. Okay, let me refresh here, click F5, because we don't see the lesson check just yet. And now we have all of the assignments waiting for us. So we've assigned 3 different assignments and a test. Let's start taking this assignment. Let's start with this probe. That's the first thing that we sent to Jim. As a 4th grade student, I click on this assignment. Here I have my probe waiting for me. Okay, I've got the scenario here. I'm going to say that Violet has the best possible answer, and my explanation will be, we covered this in class. I remember this well. And notice that it's auto-saving. So it's automatically saving their answer, but it doesn't mean it's submitted. In order to submit this assignment, so the teacher sees it, the student is going to have to click Submit. It will always give them a prompt. Say, are you sure you want to submit this assignment? Are you done? Yep, I want to submit it. I'm going to click Yes. So now I've submitted that assignment. And now it will show up in my past work section. I've submitted it. It's on the way to teachers and it's waiting for a score. Okay. So one of my assignments is done. Let's take a look at another assignment. How about this investigator article? Let's go to it. And basically, my teacher just said, read and be ready to share your thoughts. Okay, that's pretty easy for me as a student. So let me pull this up. So as a student, I can pull this up. I could save it if I wanted to. I could print it out. And I could just read this investigator article. Of course, I could make it larger if I wanted to. And at the end of every one of these investigator articles, remember there's a task here. So it's always it makes a great assignment for remote learning because it's got a little task here at the end of it. My teacher didn't tell me to do that. She just said to read and be prepared to share my thoughts. So I'm going to close this out and I'm going to say I did. I'm going to click Submit. Okay, you sure you want to click Submit? Yes. And so now when I go to past work, I've got 2 things that I've submitted. Okay. Now, what about this read about section? Okay. What about this read about section? Let's go to it real fast. Again, I've got a little reading assignment. So if you want to give a reading assignment to your class, the read abouts are the place to do it. And a lot of them have embedded interactives, and a lot of them have embedded questions. Why is it important to wear a seatbelt when you are driving a motor vehicle? It keeps you safe and prevents you from leaving the vehicle. Okay? Notice it's auto-saving, but it won't be submitted to my teacher until I click Submit. So I want to click this Submit button. And you know what? I'm going to cancel this right now. I want to share with you something that students can do on their side. If I go back to this reading section, students have the ability to have this read to them. So I've got a little speaker button here. I can also highlight a section. And when I do, a little toolbar will appear. And maybe I just want this specific section read to me. So instead of the entire page, I just want this specific section read to me. I could do that. I could highlight this section. So maybe I want to highlight this section blue. As a teacher, I often like to give students an assignment. Hey, I want you to read this, but I don't want you just to read it. I want you to highlight it. And I also want you to make notes. So students can make a note on here. I think this will be important and on the test. Now this functionality in a K-5 classroom, you may not use very much, I don't know, but in grades 6 through 8, this functionality that I'm showing you, highlighting and annotating is something that you'll probably use quite a bit. Now, how do I know I have a note there? Because I see this little red dotted line. And yes, I see that little chat about questions. I'm going to stop for questions here before too long, and we'll get all the questions answered that we can. So the dotted line lets me know that I have a note here, and I can just click on it, and there's my note. Okay. So now I'm ready to submit. So when I go down to the bottom, I can click submit. Okay. And so now in my past work, I have 3 assignments, and there's only one assignment I have left to do as a student. Let's go to do that assignment. This is my lesson check. This is a quiz that came from the test generator, a pre-made quiz. So remember, you have pre-made quizzes, and then you have the ability to create your own from scratch. I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a moment. So as a student, I'm going to start this assignment. I'm going to do this very fast just for the sake of time. I know I'm going to get a lot of these wrong, so forgive me for my score. And I'm just going to do this without even looking at them here. And you can see the variety of questions that you have available to you. These aren't just true, false, multiple choice. Got a lot of different types here. I'm just going to put a little crazy answer in there to 5. Now, if I get any of these right, it will be pretty lucky because I'm not looking at them. Maybe I'll get that one right. Let me go to next. Next. And so I click next, and I'm at my last score, and I click submit. Okay. So I've submitted this, and I can view my scores here. Waiting for some teachers to grade a little bit. So I've submitted all of my assignments on Jim's side. All of that is shown up in past work. Okay. Now let's go to the teacher side to see what that looks like on the teacher side. So when I go to assignments here as a teacher, I see that I have one person that has submitted each one of these assignments. I have 14 people in my class, and one person has submitted each one of these assignments. So let's see what Jim did on his probe. How do I see his work? Because remember, he actually had to type in a response. How do I see his work here? Remember I said if you don't know what to do, see if there's a kebab menu nearby. You go to my kebab menu and click View Scores. Scroll down here. Jim is the only person to have submitted this. Let's take a look at Jim's work here. And I can see his probe here. So the probe is popping up here. Let me scroll down and see how Jim responded. Okay, Jim chose Violet. And he said, we covered in this class. I remembered this well. Okay, all right, nice job, Jim. So maybe I want to give Jim full credit. I'm going to give him 100 points here. And I'm going to save that. I can even make a little note for him. I can say, well done. Let's see if you are correct over time. Okay? Maybe I'll save that as a note waiting for Jim. So I scored it and I left him a note. Okay? If I go back to assignments, let's take a look at another assignment. Oh, by the way, let me go back to the probe. From here, from Jim's, I could go into any of my other students as well. So we've scored Jim already, right? We already given him a score, but I'm going to have a class of other students that have taken this assignment as well. So from Jim's, I could either go to my next student by clicking on this down arrow and choosing a specific student, or I could just click on this arrow and it will take me to Jose's work, to Kenny's work, to Lisa's work. Now, none of them have taken this assignment, so we don't see their work here. We only see Jim's. Okay? So this is how you go from student to student, either these arrows moving sideways or back or down and choosing a specific student. Let's go back into assignments and take a look at this read about it. I click Kebab, View Scores. Scroll down. Jim is the only one to complete this. And let's say I told him to highlight and annotate this page. Let's say I gave them that as instructions. I'd be able to see that he highlighted and annotated this page. And then I could see his answers over here. And I could give him full credit for that. I'm going to save that. I'm going to give him a note saying, good job highlighting and making notes. Again, I think the highlighting and annotating is probably more of a middle school, high school thing, but know that you have this function K through 8. Okay? So I've saved Jim's assignment. Again, I could go from Jim to other students that have taken this test. Let's go back to assignments and take a look at his test score now. So we've graded the probe, we've graded the read about it. Let's take a look at the lesson check. I click on this lesson check, and I click View Scores. Let's go down to Jim. And here I see his View Score sheet. And here I can see exactly what students, what Jim is doing on this test. Now, they're working on this test generator today. The multiple choice test questions will be color-coded for you. So if I got it right, it will show up in green. If I got it wrong, it'll show up in red. But they're working on it a little bit today, so it doesn't do that right now. But you'd be able to see what students got right or wrong right here. And the only ones that you would have to score would be the essay questions. Okay. And just like before, I could go to different students using the down arrow or the sideways arrows. Okay. So we have sent resources back and forth between me, the teacher, and Jim, my 4th grade student. Let's go briefly to 7th grade and see how the experience is a little bit different. It's mainly the same, especially on the teacher side. I have a teacher experience that looks the same in 7th grade, middle school, as it did in elementary school. I've got my resources here. I've got my course view here. I've got my course location that basically takes me to the same location. My resources, just like in 4th grade, location is a filtering tool. I have 2,409 resources here. That's too many. Let me filter down into a module and a specific lesson in that module. Now I'm down to 57. I could even combine it with a keyword search. So maybe I'm looking for a lab. And it'll continue to filter down using either keyword or locations to find exactly what I'm looking for. Maybe you're just looking for virtual labs. I can click virtual, and 52 virtual lab hits have come up. Not all of them are students' labs. Some of them are answer keys, so keep that in mind. But here are my virtual labs, and I can choose whether or not I want to use these. This is my virtual experience. These are great experiences to do virtually. If I like the experience, okay, this is something that I want to use, just click on the kebab menu, just like we did before, click Assign, and fill out this criterion. Go through this virtual lab. Be ready for a discussion. Great thing that you could do in a remote learning environment. I'm going to make this due on the 28th, Friday. That's when I want to talk about it as a class. And I'll make this worth 100 points if they're ready to discuss. I'll click Assign. Again, like before, in middle school, a red bar will appear. And I don't even need to show you this now, but I will. It will show up in assignments. It will show up in my calendar. And it will show up, there it is, and it will show up in my dashboard as well. Okay. It also shows up, let me back up just a little bit. When I go to course view here, it's organized just like we saw before. Here's my digital table of contents. Remember, the course view affords me some file folders here. So if I want to go to natural resources, here I have a file folder for my folders for my lesson. And just like before, any one of these locations within the student book is assignable. Maybe I want to assign that probe. Maybe I want to assign a read about section. So these are just locations within the book that students can read. Let me go ahead and read, take a look at this section, see if that's something I want to send to my students. And if I do, I would just click assign and assign it that way. Okay? I also, like we saw in 4th grade, have tests here. So let's create another test. Okay? The test generator works the same way as it did in elementary school earlier that we looked at. I have my test banks here organized by module. Let's say I want to go into the module material science. Just like we saw in K through 5, I've got lesson checks, a module pre-test, and a module post-test. Okay? So these are pre-tests available to you, K through 8. And I could edit these, I could assign these, I could print these out. Now, what if I wanted to create a test from scratch? Let's show you how to do that briefly. To do that, I click on New Assessment. And I'm going to call this Wednesday Pop Quiz. And I'm going to click Create Assessment. And so when I do that, it wants to know, okay, where do you want to pull these questions from? Now, if you're like me, you know, I don't want to create every test question from scratch. I'd rather look at McGraw Hill's banks of questions and pull in some questions that have already been created. And then maybe I'll add a few of my own at the end. So I could create my own question from scratch, but let me pull in some questions from the assessment banks first. So I go add question from assessment. Okay, which test do you want to take a look at? How about this one on material science? Is there a specific test that you want to pull it from? Well, let me take a look at this module test. Maybe it has some questions I want to use. So here I have all the questions in that module test. Let me preview them. Okay? And now I can decide which ones I want to use. And notice I have an add button here. So I could read this and go, yeah, I like that question. I'm going to add it. It's been added to the test. I like this question. It's been added to the test. You know what? I don't like that one. Let me scroll for it, but I do like this one. And so I can choose which specific questions I want to be part of this test. Okay? So I'm just picking and choosing. Let me choose one more. I click Add, and that's a part of the test. Now when I exit out of this, I've got 5 questions that I chose to be a part of this test. Okay? I picked and chose them. I took a look at them. I chose which ones I wanted to be a part of this. Now if I click Save and Exit, I have a test that's been created for me. Now, when I create a test, where does that test get housed? Where is it stored? When you go to assessment, you're always going to see this location at the top. It's called My Assessments. And that's where all your created tests get stored, or even if you modify a test. So if I click on My Assessments, I'm going to see that Wednesday morning pop quiz that we just created. And from here, I could choose to print it out, assign it, or edit it. I'm going to go ahead and assign it. Okay? I'm going to have all my students take it, and I'm going to click Assign. Okay? So I have 2 assignments that have been sent to my middle school teacher, and the last thing I'll do is I'll go and I'll take those assignments and bring them back, because the middle school student experience looks different than the elementary school experience. So I'm going to go out of Jim's 4th grade class, and I'm going to go into Jim's 7th grade class. And let's see how that looks different. So the Jim 7th grade class, you're a middle school student, it looks pretty similar to the teacher experience, doesn't it? It looks nothing like that elementary school experience we saw earlier. But it has a lot of the same functions. In the student side of middle school, my assignments show up in my dashboard, just like it does on the teacher side. My assignments show up in my assignments section, just like it does on the teacher side. And my assignments show up in my calendar, just like it does on the teacher's side. And in my assignment section, I have a past work section. So as soon as I complete these assignments, they'll show up in my past work section. Let me do one really fast here. This little pop quiz, just 5 questions, so this shouldn't take very long. Natural, I'll say false. False. Let me just go through this really quickly. I'll say true. Next. Now I'm on question 4. Next. And question 5. About rubber, and I'll click submit. Okay? And I've got to click submit the assignment. Now, when I do that, I'll be able to view my scores. I got a 60 on this assignment. And if I go back to the teacher side, let's do that briefly. And I'll refresh the screen. I'll be able to see that one person has completed that assignment. One person has submitted this assignment. I can go into view scores here. And let's go down to see how Jim did. Let me view the score sheet. Now this is what it looks like, and again it's pending because they're working on this. But those that I got that Jim got right would be green. The ones that Jim got incorrect would be red, and I can see how he did on each and every one of these questions, what he chose and what the correct answer was. Okay. I'm towards the end of my time. I'm going to go ahead and see what questions we have that you'd like for me to cover in the time that we have remaining. Okay, here.
Jason, there are a few questions that you'd like me to go through.
Yeah, please.
So I think there was a question about, are there any tests that are built in, which I'm sure you've just shown. I hope that's answered. There's one question about, how do I show the video that are there for each lesson?
Oh, good question. So how do I show that? How do you show the video? And I'll show you how to assign it as well.
Okay, great.
Let's say, let's go to the videos that we took a look at earlier, which was the dolphins and the cat looking. So I would go to this course view. I could go to resources as well. So again, resources and course are just two different ways of finding what you're looking for. I like the course view. Maybe I'm just a little OCD. I like the organization of having these file folders. And so let me go into that information processing and transfer, which we were at. And let me go into the role of animal eyes. Okay? So that should look familiar. And in Engage, we saw this video right here about cat eyes. Okay, so let's take a look at this really fast. So let me go to page 1. And so it introduces the last one. Here's that video, cat eyes. Okay. So I could, as a teacher, I could just take a look at it here. But if I wanted to present it to a class, what I might do is go to this presentation, and we haven't looked at this yet. I've got a launch presentation button here. And what it will do is basically set up I'm going to call this a PowerPoint-like experience. It's not PowerPoint. It's just a presentation tool. And it walks students through the lesson. So I start with this probe. That's how every lesson begins. So that's how the presentation will begin. And if I go to next resource, lesson at a glance, let me go to the next one. And here we have this phenomena video. So I can click this arrow here, and here I have that cat eyes here as well. So if you wanted to show this to the students, the best way to do it would be to, let me move this WebEx thing out of here so I can exit out of here. The best way to do that would either be to find the location in your folders, which is Engage, or go to the presentation search, or the presentation, launch presentation. Now, if I wanted to assign that video, I'd assign it just like I did anything else. So here's the video that I just looked at, and I could maybe just assign just that video. Maybe I want to say, watch this cat eyes video. Why do you think the eyes are changing shape? Be ready to talk about it. I want all of my students to get it. I'm going to make this worth 100 points. And I click Assign. And so that's waiting for my students, just like any other assignment. And if I go to my student side, I'll be able to see that video waiting for me. I have to go into 4th grade here. here's my video waiting for me on cat eyes. And so just showing it, you could either go to the folder or go to launch presentation, but to assign it, you would do what I just did and click the assign button. And here it is for the student. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Jason. We hope that did. There's another one. Can you please tell us about lesson planning and pacing guides on ways teacher can customize?
Yeah, lesson planning and pacing guides. Well, remember that every lesson has a, let me answer that question a couple ways here. If I go to my course view here, or my resources, remember that every lesson has a pacing guide. So if I go to Module 2, Lesson 2 on speed, I've got a lesson at a glance here. And when I click this open, I have the ability to see the full track. If you have 40 minutes in a class period, how long each one of these sections should take. So here it's saying in day 1, you should be able to get through the probe, which starts the lesson, and then the engage phenomenon. Looks like this one has a video on race cars. It probably has a discussion activity about it. So its suggested pacing is day 1, you complete these 2 activities. On day 2, you have this explore activity. Okay. On day 3, explain. Okay. So I have these different things that that are on day 3. This part of this. So this explain is broken down into 3 days. And if I go scroll all the way down to the bottom, it tells me that if you're using a normal track, which is 45 minutes a class period taught every single day, this should take about 7 days. Now, as you all know, with any lesson plan and pacing, this is all suggested. And how long it actually takes in the classroom depends upon a lot of factors and any changes that you make. So you can modify this in any way. But if I scroll down here past this full track, notice that I have a flex track, a couple of flex tracks. So let's say you teach 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, not 45 minutes. It will give you a suggested pacing for this sort of a schedule. Some elementary school students, classrooms, they don't teach science every day. They may teach it 3 days a week. And so for those classrooms, here's a pacing guide for that scenario. So look at the lesson at a glance, the full track pacing guide, and then the flex track pacing guide and lesson planning. Now, the other way I was going to answer this question is, as a teacher, you're very welcome. As a teacher, you have the ability to modify a lesson that you want students to see. Okay? So we haven't spent a lot of time on this lesson, but I'm going to do so briefly. Let's say this is lesson 1. I've got this little edit button. And let's say remotely I want students to be able to see it in a certain sequence. Notice what's highlighted. Everything that's in the book, right? Starting with a probe, going into encounter the phenomena, inquiry, so it follows the sequence of the book. Maybe I want to activate something else, like the simulation. I could activate that and bring it into the presentation. And then I could bring it in to where I want it to be a part of the presentation. So I'm organizing this lesson in a way that I want students to be able to see it. So I'm going to bring this simulation to the very beginning, even before the probe. Now, when I look at this lesson, it launches this presentation, that simulation is the first thing students are going to see. Now, how do I see this on the student side? I know I'm going into this a little bit farther than you probably had planned. But let me go into this lesson on the student side. Now, when I go into, as a student, I go into lessons. If I choose that same lesson, information processing in animals, and I click launch presentation, I'm going to see that same sequence that my teacher just created for me. This wasn't the first thing I would have seen 2 minutes ago. My teacher customized this lesson for me to walk through. Now I have the probe second, not first. So as a teacher, you can rearrange this lesson so when students go online in a remote learning situation, they're seeing what you want them to see in the order that you want them to see this. And how did I do this? I went to the lesson that I wanted to reorganize. Let's say lesson 3. I clicked edit. Default will be the student pages like the probe and the labs and everything you see in the student book. But maybe, just maybe, I want them to see this lab video, which, by the way, is pretty cool. I want that to show up at the very beginning. The next best thing to doing a lab in class might be to watch students doing a lab. And by the way, K-5 teachers, you have these inquiry rewind videos that do just that. And so that edit function is how I customize the lesson experience. So that's a long answer for probably a pretty short question.
Thank you, Jason. And we're just going to take one last question, if that's okay.
Yep.
Thank you. It says, sorry, maybe you have already mentioned this and I must have missed it, but is there a way for students to write on the lines online instead of the physically in their books, either for formative, summative, or understanding questions?
That's a great question. So the book has lines for student responses, right? The online experience will have spaces for student responses. So if I look at, let me go into the course view here, and let me just choose a different module. How about this one? And I go into a lesson mapping Earth's features. All of these, the way to think of these tiles, if you will, here, let's say and explain, these are all chunks of content from the student edition. And so in the student edition, these would have lines associated with them for the students to write their responses. And if I go to, let's say, evaluate the lesson review, these would have lines for students to evaluate. But here, there's going to be spaces. So when I go to my lesson review, scroll down here, I have a space for me to type in my answer. Okay? I don't have lines here, I have a space. And when I go to revisit the probe, it's just telling me to revisit it. But let me go to the next screen here. I've got my three-dimensional thinking. And I've got a choice, A, B, or C. And I've got a space here for me to type. So there are no lines online. There's just spaces for them to type their responses. And each one of these sections, which is a section from the book, is assignable. So just like before, I just click this assign the button. So I might say read and write in any answers that are requested. And I'm going to make this work with 100 points. And I'll send this to my students. And so now they'll have this chunk of a reading assignment. And if it has a place for them to write answers, they'll just type in their answers. So every place in the student book that is asking for an answer to be written in, there is that same experience digitally, except they're typing in their answers in those spaces. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. We have another repeat session of the same webinar that we delivered today on Saturday, 29th. If you'd like to attend, we've dropped the link in the chat box. You can register there. We also have back school support and resources for other programs for us. It's the same link. So if you go on that link, you can register for any of our webinars, as many as you would like. I'd like to say thank you to Jason for his time and joining us for this webinar. And thank you, everyone. If you want, you can get in touch with us on our social channels. Thank you for joining.